In March 2009, Battlestar Galactica's controversial finale divided fans forever. But what if creator Ronald D had chosen one of 4 completely different endings that would have changed television history? While 2.4 million viewers watched Edward James Olmos as Admiral Adama fly his ship into the sun, they had no idea they were seeing just one version of what Moore called probably the most debated finale in science fiction television. What you're about to discover isn't just alternate scenes or deleted footage. These are entirely different conclusions that would have fundamentally altered the legacy of one of the most acclaimed sci-fi series ever made, and Glenn A. Larson's original 1978 Battlestar Galactica franchise. The story of how we almost got them reveals a behind-the-scenes drama as compelling as anything that happened on screen. Let me take you back to 2008 when Battlestar Galactica was racing toward its conclusion against the backdrop of real-world chaos. The writers' strike had shut down Hollywood, leaving Moore and his team scrambling to figure out how to end their masterpiece. What emerged from that uncertainty was a collection of alternate endings so radically different from what we got, they might as well have been different shows entirely. The first ending would have made Ellen Tigh the ultimate villain. Picture this: instead of the spiritual, mystical conclusion we received, the final episodes would have focused on a deeply personal betrayal. Ellen discovers that her husband Saul had impregnated Caprica 6, and she becomes so consumed with rage and jealousy that she allies herself with the Cylon Cavil. Together they capture Hera and use her as bait to destroy the entire colonial fleet. Moore himself described this version during interviews years later. Ellen was sort of turned by Cavil because she found out that Tigh had impregnated Caprica 6, and that deeply embittered her. And she sort of became dedicated to the idea of destroying Galactica and the fleet out of revenge. The climax would have been Saul Tigh facing off against his own wife, with the central question being whether love could overcome betrayal, whether forgiveness was possible even in the face of ultimate treachery. This ending would have been intensely intimate compared to what we got. Instead of angels and divine intervention, we would have had raw human emotion driving the conclusion. No mystical Starbuck disappearing into thin air, no head characters revealed as supernatural beings, just a marriage destroyed by war, playing out on the largest possible stage. But Moore rejected this approach during the writers' strike, realizing it wasn't epic enough for a series that had become about so much more than personal relationships. Still, imagine how different the show's legacy would be if the final battle had been fought not against Cylon technology, but against the very human capacity for revenge and jealousy. The second unused ending is perhaps the most fascinating from a pure science fiction standpoint, because it would have literally rewritten archaeological history. Instead of sending Galactica into the sun with the comatose Sam Anders at the helm, Moore considered having the ship crash land on Earth, remaining buried but intact for thousands of years. The episode would have ended with a present-day scene in Central America, where archaeologists using ground-penetrating radar would discover something impossible beneath those mysterious ancient mounds that have puzzled scientists for decades. The camera would slowly reveal the outline of Galactica itself, perfectly preserved under centuries of Earth and vegetation. Moore later explained, "We discussed the idea of the Galactica not being destroyed, but having somehow landed on the surface more or less intact, but unable to ever get into orbit again." Cut to the present day, in Central America, where there are these enormous mysterious mounds that archaeologists have not been able to understand. This ending would have transformed Battlestar Galactica from science fiction into science fact within its own universe. Every viewer would have left the series looking at real-world archaeological mysteries differently. Those unexplained structures in Guatemala and Honduras? Maybe they're not ancient temples after all. It's the kind of ending that would have spawned decades of fan theories and real-world speculation. But Moore ultimately rejected it as a little too cute and worried it would violate our contemporary reality. Looking back, though, it might have been the most original conclusion in television history. Instead of the spiritual ambiguity we got, viewers would have had a concrete, tangible connection between the fictional past and our real present. The third alternate ending exists only because of one of the most significant labor disputes in entertainment history. When the Writers Guild of America went on strike in November 2007, Battlestar Galactica production shut down in solidarity, leaving the final season incomplete. Moore and his team faced a terrifying possibility. What if they never got to finish their story? The mid-season finale revelations had ended with one of the most devastating cliffhangers in television history. After 4 seasons of searching for Earth, our heroes finally arrive, only to discover a radioactive wasteland. The planet they'd been seeking as their salvation was already dead, bombed into nuclear winter by some previous conflict. Katie Sackhoff, who played Starbuck, revealed years later that this episode was specifically written to function as a potential series finale if the strike continued indefinitely. She told fans at a convention, "Episode 411 is the last episode they filmed before shutting down, and it could serve as a series finale if necessary." Think about that for a moment. Instead of the controversial spiritual ending we got, Battlestar Galactica might have concluded with our heroes staring at a dead Earth, having lost everything they fought for. No resolution, no answers about the Cylons' plan, no explanation for Starbuck's resurrection, just the ultimate nihilistic ending. They traveled across the galaxy seeking hope, only to find that hope had been destroyed long before they began their journey. It would have been brutal, uncompromising, and absolutely devastating. It also would have been a perfect mirror for the post-9/11 anxieties that had always driven the series. Sometimes the promised land is already burning when you arrive. Fortunately for fans, the strike ended in February 2008, allowing production to resume. But Revelations as a potential finale reveals just how differently this story could have concluded, and how much our understanding of the entire series would have changed. The fourth and most subtle alternate ending involves just a few words, but those words would have completely changed how we interpret everything that came before. In the original script, the final conversation between the angel versions of Gaius Baltar and Number 6 had additional dialogue that was cut from the broadcast version. After 6 warns Gaius about calling their mysterious higher power God, the original script had Gaius respond, "You know it doesn't like that name. In any case, it would require mankind, in all its flaws, to learn from its mistakes." Then, crucially, the exchange continued. "I think I'll take that bet. What are the stakes? Silly me." In the broadcast version, "silly me" appears to be Gaius making a joke about what God likes to be called, but in the original context, it was about the stakes of their bet over whether humanity would repeat its cycles of violence. This single change transforms the entire meaning of the finale from a spiritual meditation into a cosmic wager, with these supernatural beings literally betting on human nature. It's a perfect example of how seemingly minor changes can completely alter a story's meaning. The version we got suggests divine oversight and divine forgiveness. The original version suggests indifferent cosmic forces treating human survival as entertainment, which would have been far more chilling and probably more appropriate for a series that had never shied away from moral complexity. Now, you might be wondering why Moore and his team had so much trouble settling on an ending. The answer lies in a fundamental problem that plagued the series from its very first episode. They were making promises they never intended to keep. Remember those opening credits, the ones that ominously declared the Cylons have a plan? That phrase became iconic, suggesting a vast conspiracy that would eventually be revealed in all its terrifying detail. Except there never was a plan. Moore admitted this publicly at the 2017 ATX Television Festival, finally confessing after years of fan speculation, the Cylons never had a plan. It all came about when we were doing the main titles and we had to have a pre-cap as opposed to a recap. And David Icke said we should have a punchy line there at the end. And they have a plan. And I was like, what does that mean? He said, it doesn't matter. It'll be great. The audience will love it. For 14 years, fans analyzed every episode looking for clues about this master plan. They created elaborate theories about Cylon motivations and long-term strategies. Internet forums buzzed with speculation about what the robots were really trying to accomplish. And all along, the creators were desperately trying to figure it out themselves. The 2009 TV movie The Plan attempted to address this promise retroactively, but by then the damage was done. This revelation recontextualizes everything about how the series was made and why the ending proved so controversial. Moore and his team weren't building toward a predetermined conclusion. They were writing themselves into increasingly difficult corners and hoping to find a way out that would satisfy the expectations they'd accidentally created. The spiritual ending we eventually got, with its angels and divine intervention punctuated by Bear McCreary's haunting arrangement of All Along the Watchtower, wasn't the natural culmination of a carefully planned story. It was a desperate attempt to provide meaning and resolution to mysteries the writers had never actually solved. But here's what makes this even more fascinating. There's still one more version of the ending that nobody has ever seen. Moore has confirmed that the original Cut of Daybreak, ran approximately 4 hours, nearly twice the length of what was eventually broadcast. This version had a completely different structure and included scenes that have never been released, even on DVD or Blu-ray. The original cut of the finale was probably closer to 4 hours. Moore explained in interviews, "There was a different structure in the script than what ended up on screen." When asked about releasing this version, he admitted that Universal Television probably still has the masters in a salt mine somewhere, but doubted they could actually locate them. Imagine what might be hiding in that lost footage. Extended character moments that could have provided better closure for beloved characters? Alternative versions of key scenes that might have made the spiritual elements feel less like a deus ex machina? We may never know, but the fact that this version exists somewhere in the Universal archives is tantalizing for fans who felt shortchanged by the ending we got. The controversy over Battlestar Galactica's conclusion has only intensified over the years. George R.R. Martin, creator of Game of Thrones, famously criticized it as a classic God did it ending, writing, "Looks like somebody skipped writing 101 when you learn that a deus ex machina is a crappy way to end a story." His criticism stung because it came from a writer known for his own intricate, morally ambiguous storytelling, but others defended Moore's choice. Critics like Alan Sepinwall praised the finale for not copping out, and many fans appreciated the series' willingness to embrace spiritual themes in an age of cynical science fiction. The debate continues to rage in fan communities, with some viewing it as a profound meditation on faith and destiny, others as a betrayal of the show's hard science fiction roots. What particularly interesting is how these alternate endings might have avoided the controversy entirely. The Ellen as villain version would have provided a purely human explanation for the conflicts. The buried Galactica ending would have given fans a concrete physical legacy. Even the emergency writer's strike ending, devastating as it would have been, might have felt more honest than what some viewers saw as a spiritual cop-out. Today, as we watch Hollywood struggle with similar challenges in bringing long-running series to satisfying conclusions, Battlestar Galactica's ending feels even more relevant. The recent cancellation of Sam Esmail's planned reboot for Peacock proves that the franchise's legacy remains complicated. After 5 years in development, even Esmail couldn't crack the code of how to recapture what made the original series special while avoiding its pitfalls. The story of these alternate endings reveals something fundamental about television storytelling in the modern era. When series become cultural phenomena, when fans invest years of their lives in intricate mythologies, the pressure to deliver a perfect conclusion becomes almost impossible to bear. Moore and his team created something genuinely special with Battlestar Galactica, a series that tackled post-9/11 anxieties with intelligence and emotional depth. But in the end, they were human writers trying to conclude a story that had taken on mythic proportions in the minds of viewers. The fact that they considered so many radically different approaches shows how seriously they took that responsibility, even if not everyone was satisfied with their final choice. The real tragedy isn't that we got the wrong ending, but that we can never see all the different versions that might have been. Somewhere in those lost 4 hours of footage, in those unfilmed scripts about Ellen's betrayal and buried starships, lie glimpses of alternate television history, stories that might have changed how we think about science fiction, about faith, about the nature of storytelling itself. The Battlestar Galactica ending we got sparked debates that continue 15 years later. The ones we didn't get remain tantalizing what-ifs, reminders that every story we see is just one possibility among many. And sometimes, the paths not taken are just as interesting as the ones that led us to where we are.